Helen Malone. I'm the National EPFP Director. I'm also Vice President for Research Innovation at the Institute for Educational Leadership. And I welcome you today to our Leadership Fireside Chat. We are very pleased to be with all of you today, and we thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mia Perry, to walk us through some of the specifics, because we're in a meeting versus webinar mode, to make sure everybody knows how to participate and know where all the buttons are before we get going.
Thanks, Helen, and welcome everyone. So just a few reminders to participate today. While we have Helen or Keana speaking, we're asking that you stay muted and keep your camera off if that's all right, just so that we can see Keana. And if you'd like to put your view into speaker view, you can do that by clicking on the right hand corner button that says view and selecting speaker view. And then later when we have a Q&A session, you can go to gallery view and turn your cameras on so that you can see everyone participating. It looks like we just have a small group today, so we're going to let you unmute yourselves during the Q&A portion, but as always, feel free to use the chat if you have something that you want to communicate, either for tech help or just to engage with the conversation. And I think in a moment we'll have some polls, but other than that, that's pretty much all you need to know today.
Wonderful. And speaking of polls, we actually want to start off with a poll first, and we'll start our fireside chat. So we have 3 polls today, and Mia, if you want to bring that up. So our first poll is asking what your EPFP site is. So we'd love to know where all of you are coming from. So we're going to give it about 30 seconds for you to fill that out. Okay, it looks like we don't need that many because most of you have filled it out. Excellent. So we can publish those polls, and we see we have a strong North Carolina showing. Welcome also to California, Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio, Texas. And we see that we have a couple other people who are actually one person who said they're other. So we'd love to know where you're from. So maybe you can put in the chat and let us know. All right, we're going to go to our next poll question.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm not, okay, there we go. Our second question, launch.
Excellent. So this is what best describes your organization. So if you could put in here, whether it is school district, higher ed, state or federal agency, non or for-profit, research institute, or consultant or grad student. We'll just give maybe 5 more seconds because you guys are quick in responding. All right, you can, I think, publish the results. Great, so it looks like we have a good showing from higher ed institutions, and then also school districts, schools, state agencies, nonprofits. Wonderful, welcome. It's great to have diversity both around geography, institutional types. That's wonderful. And then let's do the last question, which is we're going to learn a little bit more around how long you have been in the education field. So best what describes the number of years you have been in the education field. All right, it looks like most of you have been 16 to 20 years, but we also have good showing in 11 to 15, as well as 6 to 10 and 20 to 24 and on. So it's wonderful. It looks like we have, except for 3 to 5, we have a good spread overall of people and their years of experience. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been really helpful. And I'm going to just share my screen a bit and share just a few kind of slides to get us oriented to today's conversations. So let me actually do this. So we always start with land recognition, and for us, we just want to recognize we are currently, IL is located in Washington, D.C. So for us, we stand on the land of Piscataway tribe, and we always encourage you to take a moment and recognize the land that you stand on wherever you are across the country. We know we have you from all kinds of different areas of the United States. We also want to know, especially since we're going to be in the meeting mode during the discussion, that we always practice gracious space. with understanding that we're bringing our spirits with open-mindedness and be open to the conversation and different perspectives and points of view and the setting. And we're essentially inviting each other as strangers into the conversation dialogue with each other during this hour. And we're learning together in public this time with a wonderful colleague of ours who'll be sharing about her leadership and learning journey. And I also wanted to just welcome, for those of you who haven't joined our previous networking sessions and previous sessions, to just know that all of these recordings are available on the internet. We sent you instructions as fellows and last year's alums of how to access those recordings. We usually don't record a networking session, so we have one that follows for our fellows at the next hour. But for this session, this will be recorded, and you can also find their sessions for both policy and leadership pillars. And this is the first one in our Fireside Chat series, so we're really excited today. And so we are here to have a wonderful conversations with Keana Triplett, who is a North Carolina alum from 1516, and hence we have a strong showing for North Carolina today in this meeting. She is a 1516 Teacher of the Year. She has also been recognized by the National Education Association for Teaching Excellence Award and Board Certified Teacher, and also recipient of North Carolina Teaching Fellow Scholarship, co-founder of the Grassroots North Carolina Legislators in Classroom Day. She currently is an instructional coach. And so we're so pleased to have her today. And we actually wanted to, in terms of our Fireside Chat series, to start specifically in the classroom, where all of the work in our education starts, and work our way up through our future leadership Fireside Chat series to really introduce different leaders who are from various points and vantage points, really shaping policy, both in a local context and the broader context, and informing that work. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Keana here, and we're going to be dialoguing for a bit and learning about her leadership journey, and then opening up the conversation. So if you have any questions, feel free to hold them off, or if you feel that you don't want to lose the question, you're also welcome to put in the chat, and we can certainly address it that way as well. So if all of you can make sure you stay muted, and we're going to now turn it over and introduce Keana, and welcome to our Fireside Chat. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this. Giving back to EPFP is what it's all about. It's inspired me quite a bit.
Wonderful. Well, we always like to hear that from alumni. So I wanted to start off, if you can talk a bit, like what moments defined your leadership development in your career?
So I think one of the first things is I had to see myself as a leader. And the first time I did that as a classroom teacher was when Jan Stanley from Appalachian State University reached out to me and asked me to be on the Teaching Fellow Scholarship Advisory Board at ASU. And I was like, well, I'm just a beginning teacher. I'm the first year in the classroom. I don't really know what I'm doing. Do you really want me to be part of this? And she was like, yes, we need your voice. And so even though it wasn't in the classroom, it was a direct correlation with those that were entering the classroom. And so it helped me to see myself as a possible leader, and to know that my voice was important and that what I did in the classroom was important. And I think the second thing that really defined my leadership was when my principal came to me. I was a third-year teacher. I had was just finishing up the BT program, and he said, Keana, I want you to teach AP Lit. And I was an English teacher who taught 9th and 10th grade. I had been taught by my mentor teacher to say, when they came to ask me to do things, I teach writing, and I teach writing very well, and I'm just going to stay right here. And I did not see myself as an AP Lit teacher because I saw that as a leader in the department. I saw that as a leader in the school. And for him to have that kind of gumption to come and ask me that, I first said, no, I can't do this. And he continued to come back, and he said, I want you to grow, and this is where I think you need to be. And give me an opportunity. And I think that's what really developed me to want to be more of a leader, is because somebody saw something in me and they fostered that.
So how have these two particular points in time really informed how you view yourself today as a leader?
So I think that the most important thing that I've realized in my leadership journey is that it's not just about me. It's about those voices that I bring to the table that are not just mine. And so, with those two individuals seeking me out, I would not have had a voice otherwise. I would not have seen myself as a leader. So, in my leadership journey, I work really hard to go to people and say, hey, you know what? You're really good at this. I need your voice here. You are a leader in this capacity, and really empowering others, just like I do my students in the classroom, because my success depends on their success. And it's much the same way in any leadership capacity. I want to empower those who are leaders, future leaders.
Wonderful. And in addition to obviously your classroom experience, you are an EPFP alum. So we want to kind of early on ask this question of how has the EPFP experience informed how you view yourself in education policy and in public policy spaces?
So I did not realize the effect that EPFP was going to have on my journey as a state teacher of the year. But when I went and met my cohort of state teachers of the year, I was only one of two who had been or was in EPFP at the time. And so my knowledge that I brought to the table from EPFP and the perspective that I had on policy and how it was written and who I needed to talk to, and really how to do that, was shaped by EPFP. And so I knew that there was something different, that I had a knowledge base that others didn't. And so I had to really sit back and reflect and be like, oh my gosh, this is all from EPFP. This is what has given me a voice in this platform, is because I have that background knowledge that I need. And I've been around and exposed to the world of policy so that I feel more educated around it.
No, that's really helpful to know. And having had that both classroom experience and EPFP experience, what do you wish you knew when you were starting in the classroom, given that you gained that policy piece through EPFP?
So I wish that I knew how important the staff was in legislators, and how I needed to build relationships with them, not just an email chain back and forth with the representatives, because I was one of these advocates. I started in 2005, and in 2008 in North Carolina, we had a freeze of our pay. And so I wrote letters and I advocated and I was all about this. And I realized, wait a minute, I wasn't talking to the people who were really formulating the policy. And I wish I'd known that then, so that I could have taken steps to make my advocacy really kind of take it to the next level. I feel like I could have done more for my colleagues and my peers, my students, if I had known that. And EPFP gave me that. I feel like I also wish that I knew how important networking was. I had heard it in the Teaching Fellows program in North Carolina. That's the scholarship program where you receive the scholarship and in return you work for 4 years in a public classroom. And they push networking, but I did not believe them then. I did not understand how important it was to network, not just with educators, but with lawmakers as well. And so I wish that those were the two things that I had known.
So can you then walk us through what has been then your policy advocacy journey? Because you mentioned before EPFP, you have written letters, so you've always had the kind of advocacy engagement, but walk us through the kind of pre-post EPFP advocacy journey and where you are now on that journey.
So my journey kind of in policy and advocacy started back in the Teaching Fellows program at ASU, when Richard Berg came to the university. He used to come once a year, and he would have kind of a fireside chat with us and sit down and talk about the decisions that he had made that were pertinent to us and why he had made them, and we would pepper him with questions. And I began to see our representatives as human beings and people that were accessible to me. And so I never forgot that. And so from there, when I got in the classroom, I saw the needs of my students. And that's really what was the catalyst for me to become more of an advocate. And it was 10 years before I was State Teacher of the Year and had EPFP kind of come into my life at just the right time. And our state superintendent at the time, June Atkinson, she told me, she was like, this is going to be what takes your advocacy to the next level with EPFP, because you've been doing it all along. I had been writing letters, I had been contacting my representatives, I had been calling them. They knew my messages and my voice very well, to the point that when I was named North Carolina Teacher of the Year, my local representative came to me and he was like, well, I guess I have to listen to your voice now. And I said, yes, I guess you do. So I think that that's kind of where it started. And then it's just continued from there. In North Carolina, we have a very interesting geographic features in our state that make tourism central to our Outer Banks, but also to our mountains because of the ski season. And so we've had lots of issues around school calendar law and kind of the restrictions that are there. And so early on in my career, I kind of took that up as one of the things that I talked about and advocated for quite a bit, because we can have 25 to 30 snow days where we don't have instruction in the mountains. And yet we're still planning for school to be out, by June 10th, and we can't start any earlier than the week before August 26th or the Monday before that start date. And so it's really hard in the rural context to do that and to meet all the requirements, as you can imagine, with having 25 or 30 days out of your curriculum. And so that's kind of another catalyst that pushed that advocacy journey. And then I served as as an advisor to the North Carolina State Board for 2 years as the North Carolina Teacher of the Year. And that really set my journey on fire pretty much, to where I knew where I needed to go to get access to the people that I needed to talk to and how to get meetings with them and how to talk to their staff. And I became kind of friends with their staff and on a first name basis with them. And so that was the key in really continuing the relationships that I have now, because I still call and talk to these individuals, and I still email, and I get phone calls. We're looking at this, for example, one of our representatives last year called and said, we've been looking at Canvas. We've come to your school system. We've looked at how you're using this learning management system. I'm trying to push it a little further, but I just can't. I need you to contact some of your contacts, and I need you to kind of help me advocate for this, because you understand the need for it to be paid for statewide. And so I did. Not that it's come to fruition yet because COVID hit, but we'll see. I'm going to continue with that because I think that that's an equity issue also, just like for us, we have internet access issues.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because you talked about, working at the, having opportunity to see kind of the state view of education policy. So based on your experience, both as a teacher of the year and an advisor, what has that experience taught you about state education policy?
So if nothing else, I've realized how important it is for the classroom teachers to speak up, speak out, and invite people in, because our representatives don't know what they don't know. And I can't expect them to know everything about education. I can't expect them to understand the day-to-day of my teachers or myself or my students if they're not living it with us. And I can't expect them to understand how the policy shapes the reality in the classroom if they don't get to see that reality. And I think that's a central focus of what I learned most as North Carolina Teacher of the Year and in EPFP that has really continued to stick with me.
Can you say that a bit more? Because that lends itself to you organizing that North Carolina legislators in the classroom day, correct?
Correct. So basically, how our State Teacher of the Year program works is I serve on the state board as Teacher of the Year for 2 years as an advisor, and there's a principal advisor, also Principal of the Year advisor, and a State Superintendent of the Year advisor. And usually those entities don't necessarily work together, but the year that I was State Teacher of the Year, being the personable person that I am, I reached out and was like, hey, let's do this as a team because, I don't really want to go into these meetings all alone. And so we had our very first meeting with one of our representatives who was kind of the education representative, he liked to call himself. And I had a platform of, we need the Teaching Fellow Scholarship Program back because I had been like the child of this and here I am, right? And so we need this scholarship opportunity back in full force. And it struck me and my two other, we called ourselves the of the years, that continuously this representative went back to, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I've never seen that. I've not been in classrooms. When I go in, there's a dog and pony show. When I go in, they only show me, the new mural that they have on the wall, or they walk me through the kids in the best classes who are seated and doing what they're supposed to do. And I don't see the realities that you're talking about. And so after that session, we were in the boardroom at the Department of Public Instruction. And I was sitting around and we said, we've got to do something. We've got to get them to see the realities of the classroom because it's not going to change if they don't. And so we decided, hey, you know what? What better way than for teachers to invite their legislators into their classroom for a day to see what happens? And so we just kind of did a grassroots thing. We got some nice publicity flyers and did the whole social media thing. And we had our regional teams of Teachers of the Year and Principals of the Year. And our state superintendent, she was a huge advocate, Dr. Atkinson was, of this. And so we pushed it out across the state and invited teachers on the week before our legislature went into short session for that year to invite a legislator to your classroom. And so all of our regional Teachers of the Year took advantage of that, and many of the others across the state did. And we came together at the end of that day on a conference call, and we were kind of sharing our experiences at our schools and what we had seen. And one of the most meaningful discussions was with a representative on the eastern part of North Carolina who went into a third grade classroom, and we had kind of gone through Read to Achieve and these portfolios that our third grade teachers had to collect to prove that our third graders could read before they could go to fourth grade. And that binder, huge binder, was shared with one of the representatives, and he sat down for a full day in that classroom and he watched instruction, and he saw that teacher have to continually document in these portfolios of every single kid, every single thing she did, and her progress monitoring that she had to consistently do. And he said, how do you keep up with this? And she said, my paperwork is as much as my teaching. And he said, this is not at all what we designed this legislation to be. This is not what we meant when we passed this. And she said, well, this is the reality of what you passed. And so that became even more of a catalyst for us to realize, hey, wait a minute, they don't necessarily always see the realities. They see numbers on a page, or they get reports from one perspective, maybe not another. And so rather than continuing this narrative, this false narrative that public schools were failing, we were like, no, we just have to tell you that public schools are running and we're doing the best we can, and here's the reality of it. And so that was a really moving experience for me, especially going back into the classroom that next August, because I continually invited legislators and representatives into my classroom. Many of them didn't come, but I continued to offer that one-on-one, not as a proctor for a test, not for them to see things of that nature, but for them to see the realities of the classroom and how their policy dictated what I did.
So I'm wondering, what